Welcome to today's Global Connections program. I'm Bill Miller. What is Rotary International? How are Rotary International and the United Nations teaming up to eliminate the scourge of polio, as well as deal with other problems such as adult illiteracy? We'll be back in just a moment to talk about these and other hot button issues. Welcome back to our program. Today we're focusing the spotlight on Rotary International. Rotary is one of the key non-governmental organizations registered at the United Nations and is one of the United Nations key partners in dealing with a lot of international problems. My guest today is someone who knows both organizations very well. Frank Devlyn was the 2000-2001 World President of Rotary International, one of the world's largest service organizations. Mr. Devlyn is president of the Devlyn Optical Group of Mexico, a manufacturer, distributor, and retailer of optical products. Frank Devlyn, welcome to today's Global Connections program.
Well, good to be with you, Bill. Good to be in this program. There's so much about it. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I appreciate you being with me. Before we get into what Rotary and the UN are doing, let's step back to 1905 and talk a little bit about the founding of Rotary International with Paul Harris. Who was Paul Harris? Why did he want to start Rotary?
You know, that's a unique thing. Paul Harris, like many persons, goes to the big city, and he loses the camaraderie, the friendship that he had in a smaller community. And he had that unique idea of getting together with friends that were in the same different businesses. And they got together in Chicago in 1905, February 23rd, and they had different activities. 4 people got together. That was the beginning. But the concept of people of different classifications, people in business, people have profession, whatever different kinds of activities, they came together, and it started. That was a seed, and something must have been right, Bill, because we have 33,700 plus clubs, 200 countries, geographical areas. Something hit. An organization represents all religions, all sense, philosophies. Something's there. That's why we're growing all over the world.
And your motto is service above self.
That's right.
And each year, now you were the president in 2000, 2001. Each year you have a theme, and we're going to talk about yours a little later. But this year, your president, Ray Klingensmith's 2010-2011 theme is Building Communities, Bridging Continents. Is that an internationally oriented and a domestic type of theme? Is that one that helps people focus on their own communities, but think about what's going on overseas?
Well, when you stop and think about it, Bill, every local club's a local Rotary club, and they have to think first of their community, and that's building a community. But then they start finding that there's a past president called Cliff Docterman said, real happiness is helping others. And you find out by helping people in your community, different situations occur in a community, and you help them, that gives you real happiness. But then you find out that real happiness, going clear across the other side of the world, also gives you real happiness, and you become international. Because Rotary, you have that, I call it different stages. You come in, you like having friends, you're a person who's a professional person, you can be a commerce, you can be an industrialist, and you come together with other people of different walks of life, and you start finding out how you can help your community, and then you start finding out how you can help that community in faraway places, and that's being international. That's what Rotary has, and it's hit all over the world.
It certainly has. Now, I'm sure a lot of our viewers would like more information on Rotary, and they can go to www.rotary.org and tap into all different types of programs and find out what we're going to be talking about over the next 25 minutes or so.
In fact, they can get one of my books, Bill. That tells the benefits of belonging to Rotary, and they get that at franktalkbooks.com.
Sure.
There's something about it, but there's a benefit of belonging to Rotary. It's hard to explain, but it's for persons of all different age groups. Mm-hmm. For some reason, we're growing. We're the number 1 organization, numero uno. Why we're accepted worldwide. We're doing something right. And I think for a lot of people, it's worth their while to find out what it is. Just click on to franktalkbooks.com. You'll find out a little bit more.
And you've certainly written several books on Rotary. This one just happens to be on the Rotary Foundation.
That's right.
And it is an excellent resource for people who'd like to learn more about Rotary. Well, Rotary in the United Nations, Rotary was formed in 1905. The United Nations, basically 40 years later in 1945 in San Francisco. And Rotary, well, the UN was set up to eliminate the scourge of war, to promote economic and social development, and to enhance human rights. And those three goals run very parallel to the fourth object of Rotary, which is to promote international peace, world understanding, and cooperation. And they're really very, very similar. We've got a clip, a vintage clip of a documentary, really is what it was, that Rotary put together back in 1995 to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, the founding of the UN. We're going to run a little bit of that, and we'll come back in just a moment and talk about it. But for the moment, let's go to the clip.
Great.
There were many who doubted that agreement could ever be reached by these 50 countries, differing so much in race and religion, language and culture. But these differences were all forgotten in one unshakable unity of determination to find a way to end wars.
With those sentiments, U.S. President Harry S. Truman and other leaders from around the world founded the United Nations. Its purposes: to maintain international peace and security, to develop friendly relations among nations, to help solve global economic and social problems, and to promote human rights. And it's no coincidence that some of these purposes find their roots in Rotary. Nearly 50 Rotarians served as delegates, advisors, and consultants at the historic gathering. The invitation to take part in the Charter Conference was a clear recognition of Rotary's early prominence in efforts to advance understanding, goodwill, and peace around the globe. Rotary contributed not only to the founding of the UN, but also to its early work and to the creation of several of its specialized agencies. The inspiration for UNESCO grew out of a 1943 Rotary Conference in London, attended by education ministers from various countries. Today, with the end of the Cold War, the UN is moving forward to realize the ideals of its charter, actively addressing many of the world's problems.
The excitement is back, and somehow the UN is moving, if not to center stage, then into the mainstream again. There's a new sense of purpose in the air and a new energy. And this should not be surprising, since for the first time in our history, we're operating outside a Cold War frame of reference and beyond the polarization that meant paralysis for nearly 45 years.
Through community and international service, Rotary is involved in solutions to many of the same world problems being dealt with today by the UN. Problems like drug abuse, illiteracy and inadequate education, pollution and environmental degradation, as well as sickness and hunger. Increasingly, Rotary International and the UN are finding opportunities to work together for a greater result than either organization could achieve on its own. Nowhere is this more evident than in the area of polio immunization. Thanks in part to collaboration with the World Health Organization and the United Nations Children's Fund, Rotary's PolioPlus program is helping to protect 600 million children in the developing world from the crippling effects of polio.
Frank, that gives a very good overview of the historical evolution between Rotary and the United Nations, and kind of takes us up into the present with the PolioPlus program. We're going to get into that in just a moment in great detail, but let's talk a little bit about the collaboration between Rotary and the United Nations. Why is this a good working relationship? Why is it beneficial, as Rotarians will say, beneficial to all concerned?
Well, Bill, if you stop and think about it, as that documentary we just finished seeing, Rotary is international. And the United Nations is international. International groups come together, and we're proud, the Rotarians, of our association with the UN. As I mentioned, over 50% were all Rotarians when we got started with the United Nations. We continue with that. We do things. We try to back up so many. You have the UN Millennium Goals. Well, Rotarians have been working on those goals since day one, finding out how to do things, how to help humanity, how to help the local level, at the international level. So we think along those same terms. We are international, and besides being local, I stress that thing of being international. We're in that wavelength, and it's important to us. We have to come together. That's why we have Rotary clubs all over the world.
You mentioned the Millennium Development Goals, the MDGs. They've been underway now for 10 years. They started in 2000, and hopefully many of them will be accomplished by 2015. That was the timeline that was put on there. But these are really very important goals. You mentioned Rotary clubs. The nearly 34,000 Rotary clubs around the world are working on these to reduce poverty, to make sure that all primary school children do get an education, to promote sustainable development. Those are extremely important goals, and they're important for the United Nations, they're important for Rotary, and for all the other organizations in the world too. But Rotary is certainly there, and it's on the ground. Now, one event that you're doing is Rotary Day at the United Nations. This is a collaboration of bringing together Rotary leaders and United Nations leaders once a year, usually about the first Saturday in November. Sometimes that varies, to talk about issues. Why is this an important event to bring these people together to look at what's been done and what can be done in the future?
Well, Bill, it's important because of our relationship. We're proud of that relationship. I want to stress that. We're proud of our relationship with the United Nations. And also for other Rotarians come from all different parts of the world. They find out what's happening, and they also learn more about what the different programs are that the UN has and how we can be part of a solution, to collaborate, form alliances. And we're doing that. That's like I mentioned the UN Millennium Goals. There isn't one of those goals that we aren't doing somewhere in some part of the world. Quite a bit we're doing a lot about that. So we're proud of that fact. But you come together and you start finding out there's more things that unite us, and there's a lot of issues that require our help. And we come this once a year, and we find out what's happening. But we have a lot of people there. We even have an unofficial fellowship group of people that love the Rotary Foundation, the United Nations. How can they help? And they come together, and we find ways of working together. That's very important because the UN has done so much work. So many people are behind all of these different programs. We learn from them, and they learn from us because we have the grassroots support of Rotarians that have a leadership ability and a credibility factor that makes people come on board.
Well, you're watching Global Connections Television, and the main purpose of Global Connections is to focus attention on international issues that impact people from Frankfort, Kentucky to Frankfurt, Germany, and from Lima, Ohio to Lima, Peru. Welcome back to our program. There are over 1,500 non-governmental organizations that are registered at the United Nations with the Department of Public Information. One of those key non-governmental organizations is Rotary International. Today we're focusing attention on Rotary and the United Nations and the close working relationship that they both have on several international issues. My guest today is someone who's very knowledgeable of both institutions. Frank Devlyn was the 2000-2001 World President of Rotary International, one of the largest service organizations in the world. Mr. Devlyn is president of the Devlyn Optical Group of Mexico, a manufacturer, distributor, and retailer of optical products. Frank, we're talking about Rotary International, the United Nations, and we're going to get into this PolioPlus program, but we showed a video a little earlier that the founding of the United Nations and what role Rotary played, but we also found another clip that features you, as a matter of fact. You're in there the year that you were the president, and we're talking about this close working relationship, but this was done, I believe it was in 2000, as I recall, if memory serves, the year that you were president, and it was done by Rotary International. And again, it adds a little more to the PolioPlus program. So what we're going to do is go to the video for just a moment, and we'll come back and talk about it. But let's go to the video.
One such example is the 60-year collaboration between Rotary International and the United Nations, begun at the UN Charter Conference in 1945. 50 Rotarians, including a number of former and future Rotary International presidents, participated in the conference and acted as delegates, advisors, and consultants. 4 years later, Rotary member Carlos P. Romulo of the Philippines was elected President of the United Nations General Assembly. Today, Rotary holds the highest consultative status with the United Nations as a non-governmental organization. In this capacity, Rotary has a voice within the UN system, allowing access to its people and resources worldwide. Rotary's long association with specialized agencies like the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has been the driving force in the global initiative to eradicate one of the most crippling diseases in the world.
Frank, that was probably a trip down memory lane for you, I'll bet.
That was a younger me that you saw right there. Yeah.
Well, it was certainly very impressive. And how did your theme, as I recall, was to create awareness, take action. That was every year, a new president has a new theme. Create awareness, take action was your theme. How did you bring that theme into it when you were interacting with the United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, as well as some of the other folks that you interacted with that year?
Well, it's very unique because you create awareness about everything the United Nations is doing. You create awareness about the different programs that are being carried out by the United Nations, what the United Nations is doing, and then you take action. You get inspire Rotarians to take action. And that's at every level. And that was very unique because it involved the United Nations. Create awareness about every program. Take action, Rotarians, of how you can participate, how you can help, and get on board to carry out the good work that we're trying to make a better world.
And one of the, well, there are a lot of good works out there, but the key good work, I guess, over the last 20-some years or so has been the PolioPlus program.
Yes.
And this is it was started by Rotary in 1985. I think the UN got on board about 1987 with the World Health Organization, UN Children's Fund. And we're going to talk about that for the next couple of minutes. But while we're talking about it, we're going to run a little video of the final inch. And this was produced by Tom Grant. Tom was on the program several months ago. And it shows the scourge of polio. And of course, you and I, we remember the iron lung, but we're going to roll that and we'll just talk over it while it's running. But talk a little bit about the PolioPlus program. What was the rationale for it? Why is it important?
You know, Bill, when you stop and think, Rotary carries out so many programs. This polio, we call it PolioPlus today, is our corporate project, our priority project. But we still carry thousands of projects. But we want to demonstrate to the world that for the second time in the history of humanity, after smallpox, we can eliminate a disease. If we can't eliminate polio, like it's been mentioned, the World Health Organization, how are we going to face AIDS, tuberculosis, all of these things? We're at the final inch to do something about eradicating polio. The world's come on board. Rotary works with alliances with all non-governmental organizations and governments. At every different level, we're working together. We prove that by working together, you can do something, and that's what polio, eradicating polio, that mission, we call it PolioPlus today, to end polio now. We're demonstrating that it can be done, and we will get it done, but we have to work together. You can't do it by yourself.
And the world is right on the verge. Rotary and the United Nations and the Centers for Disease Control, they're right on the verge of pushing it across the finish line, that final inch. And that is a very difficult final inch, but it is certainly within sight, and it's going to happen. And of course, when that happens, not only will millions of people not suffer the scourge of polio, either by dying, 50,000 would die every year, literally tens of thousands, millions more would be afflicted with this horrible disease, but it will save people in the United States over $240 million a year that they don't spend on tax money to go to anti-polio programs, and the taxpayers of the world will save $1.5 billion every year. It's the largest international health program ever taken, and Rotary launched that. Rotary, it was the Rotarians. Did you know any of the original folks who went? I think they were in Indonesia or in the Philippines. I can't remember which.
Well, it started by what we call a 3H, Health, Hunger, Humanity. Clem Renoff had that idea, and then they carried out a project in the Philippines. And a little bit later, it was very successful. Carlos Canseco, who was, I'm the second Mexican to have been the president of Rotary International, third from Mexico. And he saw that it was effective, and so Carlos Canseco talked with other leaders in the world of Rotary and said, we can do this worldwide. We came together with Albert Sabin, all the World Health Organization, and came on board. Yes, it can be done. And we hoped it could have been done beforehand, but we find out we're right on the right track. So, yes, we've known all of these people, but the ability to bring together, Rotary has something at any level, whether it's a small project in some community, the credibility factor, Bill, is very important. The credibility that people in many parts of the world, sometimes they aren't too happy if it's just a government project. But if they see someone like Rotary's involved, it just gives added credibility, and it's proven itself. In fact, I think as Jeffrey Sachs says, the Rotary model, how to get things done, and we're glad to be part of that model, to show that things can be done by forming alliances. So you come together, and everybody's come on board. Every president of Rotary, the chairman of the Rotary Foundation, every club president is very proud of everything that's been done to eradicate polio, because it's a team effort. It never has been just one person. It's been many persons. Rotarians feel very strongly about that. That's why it's our priority project, and we're working together. There isn't a Rotarian doesn't know about it. We tell everyone else about it because it's an example of a club doing a small projects, then doing medium-sized projects, and now doing mega projects and being successful at it.
A mega project it certainly is, without a doubt. How important is it that that the United Nations has a partner like Rotary that has 1.2 million members, the boots on the ground, so to speak? What role can they play in this PolioPlus program?
I think the UN sees the benefit of the added credibility that Rotary International, that Rotary clubs and Rotarians give. That added credibility is a factor. I stress it several times. I've stressed that with you, Bill, because that's the main thing that Rotary offers. That's why people join Rotary. Even in my books I mentioned that it's a credibility factor that not everybody's accepted. You have people that are leaders in their community that are accepted. They represent a classification, and those people come on board and they work together, and they have credibility in their local community. They have credibility in their region, their country, and the world. So that credibility factor, and you call it added credibility, as I like to call it, because that's what we came to offer, and the United Nations sees that. They see that, as we also see that the United Nations is doing good work. That's why we support the work of the United Nations. We're proud of it. And I'll stress it over again, if we didn't have the United Nations, we have to invent it all over again. The same way Rotary clubs, we've done something good that have to invent us all over again.
You're right there. You're absolutely right. That is something that is so important to stress. The UN is with any organization. Rotary, they all have challenges. They all have problems, obviously. Every group does. But as you mentioned, if there were no United Nations, you'd have to reinvent it, because you need an organization that brings the countries of the world together to promote peace. You need an organization to help move aircraft and ships and mail and weather information around the world, and that is absolutely critical. Somebody has to do it, and the job falls to the UN, and no one country or block of countries could do that. It just would not be feasible, but it's important. You mentioned communication, and you have certainly done that with your frank talk on the Rotary Foundation. There's no doubt about that. You're very prolific. You've written some great books. But talk about how you get the communication out to tell the world about what Rotary is doing. Rotarians may understand the PolioPlus program, but the vast majority of the people out on the streets, especially in the United States perhaps, maybe it's better in Mexico, I hope, they don't know about the PolioPlus program. They don't know what the United Nations does every day with the peacekeeping, 16 peacekeeping missions. How can we get that message out? How can we help people better understand these issues, and better yet, how those issues impact us, we the people?
Well, it all goes down to the basics. Rotarians themselves, I tell other people who aren't Rotarians, there has to be something in an organization with almost 34,000 Rotary clubs. There has to be something in 200 countries. Click onto Rotary.org, you'll find out about it. In my books, there's so many organizations, and Rotary partners with other organizations. We've found out the benefit of forming alliances, and we give added credibility to those organizations that we work with. Goodwill Industries is an example. I've been involved with them. We have a memorandum of cooperation like we have with the UN Population Fund. We have these memorandums of cooperation that we work together. We find ways of working together, and we get more things done. How can you tell the world? Well, we have websites. We have district websites. We have club websites. Google Rotary at any level. Put on Rotary for any community. Put it for Frankfurt, Germany, or Frankfurt, Kentucky, or put it for Mexico City. Just Google us, and you'll find out all kinds of Rotary clubs. You find out what's happening in your community, and you find out other things, what the programs are. Because, the unique thing about Rotary, Bill, is every week, Rotary clubs come together. Every week. It's not something once a year. It's every week. Every Rotarians have to go to every weekly program, but a lot of them do. They like going to the programs or weekly programs. Then they have Rotary clubs that are e-clubs. They meet online to find out where Rotary is. One thing about the uniqueness about Rotary, Bill, and I've commented many times, is the ability of learning to change with the times. And Rotary's always done that. And we continue to change with the times. That's why we're so relevant. That's why we stand out. So you click onto Rotary and find out everything is in your community, in your country, and in the world. You'll find out what it is, but you get the word out. Get the word out, and there's so many ways. Of course, we're in the internet age, and that's one way of doing it, but you name it, Rotary's found every way in the world to get the word out, the same way United Nations done. But the partnership issue, partnering, when good organizations come together, a lot of good things happen. The same things happen with Rotary at so many levels, whether it's getting wheelchairs with a wheelchair foundation, working with Goodwill Industries, you name it. We just work together like we do with the United Nations, and we do that at the local level. So many organizations, whether it's the Red Cross, we give that added credibility factor that Rotarians of the community who are respected come on board, and we know that we're doing something good because we're respected and we maintain that image. If we find out that something's wrong, we pull away from it. But Rotarians understand credibility is very important, and we maintain high standards. That's why we have what's called the four-way test. Do things that are correct, higher ethics in everything that we're doing. But like in everything, you have all kinds. You have good points. You have people that sometimes you have sometimes someone comes on board, like in the best of families, the best of religion, the best of business. You have something comes on, but normally by far, we stand out worldwide for having the vast majority are all on the up and up.
Well, now Rotary is certainly doing a lot more to promote world peace and a better understanding and to create a better world through like the PolioPlus program. You've also got a variety of other programs, the Peace Scholars program. You've got the Group Study Exchange program where you have young professionals go overseas, they spend a month, come back. The group from another country will come to the United States or Canada or Mexico, wherever it might be. You have the Ambassadorial Scholars program where a student will go overseas and study for a year at Rotary expense. So these are wonderful programs. But Frank, we're down, we can't talk about them today, unfortunately, but we're down to our last minute or so. But just tell me briefly, why is it important for us, we who look at Rotary, we who look at the United Nations, why is it important for us to learn more about both of these organizations?
There's something good that's being done by the United Nations. You want to learn about that. There's something being good being done by all the different Rotary clubs of the world. You want to click on and find out what that is. Because we all have an obligation. We're part of a family of nations. We're all part of humanity. We have to come together and find ways of working together because you can't do it by yourself. That's worldwide. You can't do anything by yourself. You got to bring good people on board. People have to understand one another. That's what Rotary tries to help get people. You learn to respect people from all different cultures, different religions, so many different backgrounds. That's why Rotary has all these kind of people from different backgrounds. So that's what the United Nations does too. So we're big, good partners.
Frank Devlyn, thank you so very much for a very interesting and a very informative program.
Well, good to be with you, Bill.
Thank you. I'm Bill Miller. Thank you for joining us on today's Global Connections program.